All right, we're all good on that. We'll go back here. So jumping into my story, some of you know, some of you don't know. I grew up in a wilderness resort outside of Lumbee, BC, and um, I left that resort, went to college with a few guys that are actually on here, and then went and did my business degree, graduated, and I was running a couple companies actually. And then my parents phoned me up one day and said that they were looking at selling the resort. They wanted to get out because they were getting older, um, and they gave me the choice of taking over or they were looking at selling it. So I decided that I would like to take over the business and at least give it a shot to kind of save the family business, if you will. And we decided that I was going to be there for 2 years and see how it goes, and just work from there. So that's essentially what happened. We signed a 2 year contract. I came in, and in the first year, I managed to build up the business 60% above the revenues that it was at the previous year before. And as I was working, like the business was interesting. It's interesting living at a resort, but I found out fairly fast when you're actually running the business versus just living here, you are very committed to being on site, and it being a wilderness resort, that implied that you were not spending a lot of time with friends and even family outside of whoever came to the resort to come visit you. So I started to find out fairly early on in the business that I would like a little bit more freedom than I had, and those thoughts began forming my first year. I did stay for the second year, and I grew our revenue by an additional 40% again on top of that. So by the time my 2 years was up, I had more than doubled the revenue from when I first got there, as well as brought on some staff and introduced some systems. And that's kind of when I first started looking at um, how do I introduce systems, and why I'm introducing systems to be able to scale the business up, because I realized that the only way for me to fulfill my responsibilities with the family and the family business was to and to gain my freedom was to scale up and hire staff to replace me essentially, and then I would be able to get out. So how did I go about doing that? One of the first things I did was listen to clients that were coming to the resort, as well as phoning clients, previous clients, and finding out what it is that they were looking for in terms of what they found value in at the resort. And we started implementing some of those ideas, and it could be anything from building playgrounds for the kids to putting hot tubs in the cabins for the off season, or opening up for corporate retreats and weddings and things like that. And so we started implementing those ideas, and that's what helped us bring the revenue in to actually start paying additional employees to come in and build our systems. And so, like I mentioned before, at the end of the 2 years, I I built the business to a point where I felt that I was capable of leaving, and the business would be able to continue to grow from there, which freed me up. So the big question then was, now what do I do with my life? Um, there was a couple things that I knew I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted to do specifically, but I knew I wanted these things to be a part of my life. And those were, first of all, location independence. And that was a big one, because being at the Wilderness Resort, I had none of that. I was very locked into being there. So that was my number one. My number two was I didn't want to be restricted to an hourly wage. I have been fairly entrepreneurial from high school onward, basically. And I wasn't interested in working for a set amount per hour, because I knew that would be limiting, or could potentially be limiting to me in the long run. However, I might take a cut on that in the short run. Another big one was I needed to know that my contributions mattered. And what I meant by that is, or what I mean by that is, I wanted to know that what I was doing, A, had a direct impact on the business, and I could see that the effort I put in was the effort that was going to be put out. And then B, I wanted to know that what I was doing was actually a positive thing. I wasn't contributing to something that I didn't believe in. I wanted it to be scalable. Working at the resort was scalable. I was able to grow it. However, I realized that there would be a point where it would be extremely hard to scale if I wanted to, like, let's say, get into a second site or something like that. It was going to be a massive amount of effort, especially with all the physical infrastructure and everything that would be involved if I wanted to build out an entirely new resort. I mean, I could expand this to a certain degree, but if I really wanted to build out and make it global, it would be a huge undertaking. So I thought if I'm going to start a company, I'd like to set it up so that it's much easier to scale right from the beginning. And I saw an online business as being uh, the vessel that might get me there. And then lastly, I did want to have an impact. I wanted to create value in the world where people would actually be stoked on whatever it was I was creating or doing, or however I was serving them. I didn't want to be some guy that built widgets or iPhone cases or something like that. So those are my big five, and essentially from there, I had to figure out what I actually wanted to do. I knew what my business or what I wanted my life to look like, but I didn't know the specifics of what I wanted my business to look like. So from there, I left the resort, like where I was at. I moved to Kelowna. I had some savings in the bank. I had enough that I felt I could last a year off my savings if I budgeted and I wasn't too excessive with my spending. So I thought to myself, okay, I've got a year. I'm gonna figure this out, and first I just need to sit down and think about what it is I actually want to do, and I don't want to cave to going and getting a job because that'll distract me from what I'm doing. So I dedicated myself to not going and getting a job because it didn't really fit in exactly with what I wanted at that point anyway. So I talked to people that were doing what I thought I wanted to do, people in the tech industry, in the startup industry, um, and other entrepreneurs that were starting out physical businesses. I searched out people online that were coaching. I paid a lot of money, thousands and thousands of dollars for both coaching calls and courses on um, how to start up companies and what they should look like and what you need to be doing, um, and also how to actually find out what my niche could be. So for anybody that's looking and to find out what their niche could be, there's a lot more that I could get to into on this, but basically it's getting into an area that you know that you've got some experience in. Don't start from total scratch. It's just make it a lot harder. Um, Something you have experience in, and then applying skills that you have to to that particular market or niche, and those skills might be different for every person. And then a really important one, and I kind of found this out through another business that I attempted to start once, is find a market that actually has money. You might have a great idea and people might actually want it, but if they don't have the money to pay for it, then you're wasting your time. Um, so putting that all together, I came to the conclusion that after I'd kind of sat and thought and meditated on it and talked to people, at the end of the first month in January there, I came to the conclusion that I'd like to start working on a company that catered to growing resorts because that was where my experience was. That's where I had success and I knew I could do it. So I started doing that, and it was only a couple of weeks into that I got a message from a guy that was part of one of my networking groups, my mastermind groups, and he knew another guy that I'd never met whose name was Jeremy, and Jeremy had built up um, a couple fairly large businesses, some seven-figure company businesses, and he was looking at building up a new company. And so this guy that had messaged me just said, you know what, go talk to Jeremy and see what he's doing. You might learn some stuff from him for building up what you're doing. So that's what I started doing. I started talking to Jer just through Skype, and we started having more and more like conversations. And as Jer got to know me, he basically offered me a position, well, offered me a partnership, I should say, with a company that he had conceptualized but he hadn't done anything with. And at first, I was leery to work with him, and I didn't really think it was exactly the direction I was going. But once I looked more at like what the company could be, I realized it could fit in with what I was doing, as well as provide an opportunity for me to learn a ton about building online companies, because Jared had done it before, and he was working with other people that were A players in the game. And I just thought, you know what, my learning curve is going to be a lot steeper if I work with this company, and I can still have time on the side to work on the resort thing if I so chose. So that's basically what I ended up doing. Was I started working with Jer. We started a company, and right away I started jumping into talking with and working with guys that were doing some incredible things, and I was basically just trying to soak up as much as I could. So just a few guys that I'm working with, and where a lot of these systems are coming from and have been tested and tried. So Mike Schwartz, he's got myzone.com. He's got a ton of other companies as well that he started, and he is a huge advocate, and he's tested a lot of the systems that we're using, and his companies make him an average of over $10 million in annual revenue. Todd Herman, he's actually now a partner in one of our companies, but he was just part of one of the masterminds before, and we were going through a lot of the strategy stuff with him in terms of how to set companies up. He's a coach. He started off as an athletic coach, coaching high performance athletes, professional athletes, and he realized a lot of it was mind stuff, and started getting into coaching teams, and then eventually coaching millionaires, and now he coaches a number of billionaires. He's based out of New York, and he's a high level player, and he knows kind of what it takes to set a business up, and more importantly, how to scale from there. Jeremy, as I mentioned, he's actually one of my partners, and I've been learning quite a bit from him. And he started multiple companies, as well as being an Amazon seller. And as I mentioned before, he's got 6 and 7 figure companies, and a lot of his specialty is more to do with the marketing side of things, which I won't get into as much. But he's also very well versed in organizing, and actually he's also really good with setting up systems, which is a big part of what we're going to get into later. And then Juan, he's the founder of Mindvalley South America. Mindvalley being a company that actually just builds other companies. So they've done it quite a bit, and his company does over $2 million a year in revenue, and is fairly new as well. So just getting into the basics of how do you set your company up for success. There's 3 components that play into that. There's people, there's your product, and then there's your processes. And everything flows well. The idea is that if the people know the processes, that leads to profitability. If the people understand the product, that's what plays into your brand. And if you have a process and you have a product, that will play into scalability. And you have to have a product that people actually want to buy, and I think that's where a lot of people fail. I know that I took entrepreneurship in school, in university, and actually a couple of the guys on the call took that course with me, so they can probably attest to this. We learned a fair amount in entrepreneurship, but I think the one spot that it failed majorly was the teacher that taught it was a brilliant man, but he taught us to think of a problem that we had in our lives and develop a product to that. And I've since learned that that's really not the best way to go about coming up with a product that people want to buy, because your pain might not be other people's pain. And part of that process as well is going out and actually validating it, which everyone will tell you. I think the problem is coming up with a preconceived notion that your pain is shared by other people. I think it's actually better to come into the whole process from a blank slate. So the process that I've learned and kind of worked on perfecting, and there's people that do this better than I do, but is this kind of 7-step process here. So first, what I'll do is I'll actually look at. So I don't have any ideas in my head at all about what I actually want to do for forming a company. I'll look at a demographic that's worth pursuing, and as I mentioned before, you have to go into a market that actually has money. So you kind of want to avoid anything that's not for profit. You want to go avoid volunteer organizations. You want to avoid really small, like mom and pop uh, demographics, like cafes or something. That's kind of a, it's not a good, um, well, it's not always a good idea to get into something like that, and that might depend on the cities that you're in as well. You want to go after somebody that's got ideally 100K in revenue or more in profit at the end of the year, so that you know that they have some income that they can um, invest into something that's worth investing in. So once you've found a market, ideally it would be a market that you have some experience with, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So then what you do is you'll go and you'll contact people in that market, and I've actually done this with a few different companies that I was looking at starting, and we did do this with the company I'm running now, which is Sidekicks. We'll actually send out emails, hundreds and hundreds of emails to people that are in the industry. I like B2B. I think it's easier to sell business to business rather than business to consumer. Because businesses are often on lists, so it's easier to find lists for businesses that already exist rather than find consumers. Although that's starting to change with the way that social media is set up. But anyway, what you'll do is you'll contact whoever your demographic is, and you'll just say in your initial emails that you're looking to find out more about their industry and how they operate, and just say you're doing a research project or something, and see if any of them will contact you back. And then from there, ideally, you'll jump into phone calls. And it might take a couple of emails to get into phone calls. What we like to do is just send an email saying, I'm going to phone you. So get ready. And then some people will be more open to responding that way, just even in an email. So out of a few hundred emails that you send, I usually find the ratio is about 10 out of every 100 emails you'll send will actually respond back to you. And those are the people that you want to call first. And so you'll call those people and you talk to them. And the idea is to actually find out what is their pain. Like, what is it that is the biggest problem in their life? And there's a whole process to that. And unfortunately, I don't have time to get into that right now, but there's a process to actually finding out what those pains are and digging deep and finding common pains. So after you've phoned and talked to a couple of people, you're actually going to find um, often you'll find that there's common issues within the industry, and then while you're in those calls, you actually want to brainstorm with the people that you're on the call with, like what a potential solution to that could be. And often it's a solution that they might even have an idea of what that solution is, but they don't have the time to actually put into building it or creating it, or the resources to do it or whatever it is. And once you've found out that there's a common pain, and you've identified what that solution is, then you find out what the value of that solution is. You find out, okay, what's it worth to you, which usually comes down to how many hours a day is it going to save you, and what's your time worth in hours, or how many hours a day is it going to save your company, and then you can actually put a value on it and say, like, listen, it's worth. It sounds like it's worth at least $1,000 a month to you in terms of saved time. Um, would you be willing to pay $200 a month for this project to save you, or for this product to save you $1,000 a month? And often they're going to say yes. And then if you get ballsy about it, you can actually say, all right, um, give me that $200, and uh, I'll come back to you in a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever, depending on whatever product it is, and I'll build you this solution, and you can work with me. We'll collaborate on together, and we'll come up with a solution, and we'll do it. And if you can find, I'd say if you can find at least 5 people to give you their money that way to pre-build a product, there's a lot more that goes into it. But if you can find 5 people to pay you for a product that doesn't even exist yet, then it's worth getting into. It's worth building, because if they find it's a common problem in the industry, other people are going to have that problem, and if people are willing to pay for it, then other people are willing to pay for it as well. So then you'll actually go out and you'll build that product, and you'll give frequent updates to the people that are your investors, and you can work out deals with them saying, I'll give you a lifetime discount of 10% if you invest with me, or I'll give you the first year free after this, or whatever it is, or yeah, whatever deal you want to work out in order to bring them in, and then just keep them in the loop, and then build a product, and then just keep getting feedback from them, and then from your next customers, and refine it from there. So that's idea extraction. And if any one of you has more questions on that, I can go over those later. Then the next step, after you've actually got your idea and you have an idea, you've built it out, you are actually making money off of it, is to realize that you've actually started a company, and that means that you should probably buckle down and set your vision, because if you don't have a vision, it's going to be really, really hard to get people to tap into what it is that you're doing and understand where it is you want to go, and actually get there. And something that's interesting, and I think everybody kind of knows innately, is that everyone is working towards something. Everybody has an idea of where they want to go or where they'd rather be. I'd say in 95% of the people out there, that's the case. And people get frustrated if they feel like they're just spinning their wheels, if they're just doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not getting them anywhere. And that definitely includes employees. It's a huge part of management, is just making sure that your employees are not disgruntled because they might be getting work done, but they don't see the results of it going anywhere. And people want to know that their work is actually valued and that it counts for something, and it's working towards something bigger than just pushing paper. So what you're trying to do is you want everybody pulling in the same direction. What we say is, actually, what we say is actually what makes the boat go faster, and that's something that we took from the Newark rowing team. They have a saying anybody can have any contribution to the boat, and anybody can bring their ideas to the table. However, if it's an idea that doesn't make the boat faster, then we're not going to listen to it. And that's more important for startups than it is later in the game. But essentially, it is, don't get distracted. Like, don't. Let me see how I go. So let me just go back a slide here. Oops. What that means is you want everybody pulling in the same direction, and you don't want some of the organizers or owners of the company knowing where you're going, and other people don't know where they're going. They're just working, but they don't actually have an idea of where they're trying to get to, and it's going to make it extremely hard to get from where you are to where you want to be if it's not extremely clear to everyone in the organization where it is that you're going. So the way that we set up our companies, and we worked with guys, and it's not rocket science. It's stuff that you learn in business, but you don't really learn the importance of it to the degree that you do when you're actually starting businesses and you're actually working with employees. Is you want to be very, very clear on your long-term visions, on where you want the company to go. And I think, like, coming out of business school, a lot of those visions are, what are you making money? How big is your business? Stuff like that. And that's kind of important, but I think what's sometimes more important is being very specific about your vision, like saying, we want to be on the cover of Forbes with the headline, most innovative company of the year, or whatever it is that you guys want to be known for. Make that a target, and then have your targets for revenue, but then also have targets for, like, maybe things that you want to do socially or whatever. We want to actually help out, build schools in Malaysia or whatever it is. So get specific with what you actually want to have accomplished by that time frame, and make sure that you include stuff that's not necessarily just within the constraints of the business itself, but social projects outside of that, and or specifics, like how do you want to be perceived in the media, and that kind of stuff. Then from there you leave that, and that's just set kind of your vision. I wouldn't say you have to get too specific in the goals on your tenure, because it's quite a ways away and things might shift by then. Where you want to get more specific with your goals is your 5-year targets. So the big thing with setting your vision is you want a really clear idea of where it is you want to be. And then everything you do after that, every goal you set after that, has to be tailored towards whatever your long-term vision is. And that's kind of the key here. So where do you want to be in 5 years so that you're able to hit your 10-year target? And what we like to do is for our targets, like if we want to hit 5 years, we set 5 goals in 5 years of where we want to be. So we'll set a goal, we'll set how we plan on getting to that goal, and there might be a few steps to that, how we plan on getting that goal. And then we set a measurable result. And this is not rocket science either. It's usually something they teach you in high school or even grade school, is setting SMART goals. And I don't always like using the term SMART goals, but it's effective, because what you're doing is you're actually setting a measurable result. So it's like, we need X number of units by this date, and this is how we're going to get there. And you can actually measure. You shouldn't say, we want to be producing widgets. It's like, no, we want to produce 10,000 widgets with a 0.05% variable in terms of units that are offered, whatever it is. Like, make sure your results are very clear and attainable. And then from there, you basically do the same thing. So you break down, you've got your 5-year goals, you break it down to your 3-year goals. Like, what do I need to be at? What point do I need to be at in 3 years to make my 5-year goal happen? And then you break it down again. Where do I need to be 1 year from now to make sure that my 3-year goals are attained? And then where it starts to get more important, and where I think business schools often fail, is they don't break it down far enough. Because as a human, it's hard to actually, like, psychologically, it's hard to imagine anything past 3 months realistically. Like, you can write it down on paper, but it's hard to actually say, okay, like, schedule it out, plan it out, this is what I'm going to do. It doesn't usually go beyond 3 months ahead of us, and that's just kind of how we're programmed to think. So you set your quarterly goals, and that's when you start to form a vision of what you're actually going to be working on for the next little while. And then the most important thing I think that we've been doing in building out our companies is actually setting 2-week sprints. So you're setting your goals, you're looking at where we want to be in 10 years, but you're biting it off 2 weeks at a time. So you're like, okay, we've got this idea, working backward of how we want to get to where we want to go. Now, what does that look like for me in the next 2 weeks? And really, even if you break it down further than that, it's like, what does that look like for me in the next week and the next couple of days? So what we did was and I guess what we're still doing, is we meet with the team every 2 weeks, and we set our 2-week sprint in terms of what we're actually want to be working on, and make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction, that we still are getting the things done that need to be done. And you tend to get a lot done if you set your goals in 2-week sprints versus setting your goals at 1 month or for the quarter or whatever it is. And that seems to be a very effective method that we've been using so far. And the way that we make that happen, the way that we ensure that we're hitting all our goals and that our vision is actually being obtained, is by using project management software. And I would highly recommend using project management software to anybody that owns a business, or really even if you just have personal stuff that you want to get done. It's good to have it, because it'll set out all your tasks for what it is you want to do, and you can check them off, and you'll see them getting done, and you know what it is that you need to get done to actually get to where you want to be. And so a few project management software tools that are good are Trello, Asana, and Basecamp. And we use Asana. We build out everything in Asana. And I don't have tons of time to get into how we use it, but let me just wait for it to open up here. I'm going to show you how we set up a company Asana. I'm not going to show you Sidekicks, which is our major company. I'm going to show you another company that we've been working out slowly. So this is Summit Media, and this is Asana. And if you've never seen it before, it can look confusing. Once you've started using it, it is actually pretty basic to use, but it's got a lot of tools in it that make it extremely effective. So on the side, you have projects, and then you can set your projects in here. So the first project, if I'm setting up a company in Asana, the first project I want to do, and you can do this in Trello and or Basecamp, set it up in a similar fashion. But in Asana, I've got my strategic plan for the company, and then I've got my long-term vision. And when I click on it, it'll show the task on the side, and it'll have like, this is what we envision for Summit Media. And then I've got my 5-year goals, and don't pay too much attention to this because these goals aren't actually set out in the exact way that they should be. But they do all work towards the long-term vision. I've got my 1-year priorities here, what we want to get done in the next year. I've got my quarters set out here. So I'll keep actually my quarterly goals. I'll actually keep goals from the previous quarters to see what we've accomplished. And then as we build out, we'll set goals for the quarter coming up, which is going to be ending here pretty soon. And you've got all your goals there. And then you break it down into 2-week sprints. The 2-week sprint, we don't have much in because the 2-week sprints are usually broken up into what I've broken up into as the 5 categories of the business, which is, here we've got different names for them. Special ops means the operation side of the business. Product dev is product development, stuff that you're building out and innovating on. Finance, pretty self-explanatory. Sales and marketing, again, pretty self-explanatory side of the company. And then your backlog. So before I get into that, just really quickly, we also like to set the company heartbeat. So that is, what are you all about? Like, what is your company about? Who are you? And what do you represent? And it's important to think that out because you'll want to know moving forward, who you are as a company, but more importantly, you want your employees to know who you are as a company, what ideals you represent, what you value, and how you should be represented. So you've got your core values here, which is basically just things that you value. Core focus is what it is you actually want to do. And then your purpose, cause, or passion, I like to just put into one sentence and have like one sentence that says this is exactly what we do. As far as setting all your tasks in any of these departments, let me just see. That's probably not going to have. I think a lot of these have been done actually by the business card partner in here, but you can set tasks like within sales and marketing. This is a sprint for the next 2 weeks in terms of what we want to do here. And if you click on any one of these tasks, then like the big thing is you can put a description in the task, and most importantly, you can assign it to one person. Because if you have more than one person working on a task, then nobody's really accountable for getting that task done. So here it's easy to assign it to one person in the team, and then it's up to that person to make sure that task gets done by a certain date. And then the one last thing is have a backlog. I think this is really important for most companies to actually set up a spot where you can put any ideas that you have that are not ideas that you're going to do in the next 2 weeks but need to be done. Because all these tasks are just things that need to be done in the next 2 weeks, and then in the backlog is where everything else goes. So if you need any other ideas that come up, which inevitably will, you will put them into the backlog, and then at the end of your 2-week sprint, the next time that you have a 2-week sprint, you can actually take these and divvy them out to people and sections to get those tasks done. So going let's go back here. If you guys are interested in how to, whoa, I'm all over the place here, in how to set that up. Sorry, let me go back. And how to set that up. I do have templates that you can use. So if you want to, you can hit me up on Facebook after if you want templates for how we set up the company in terms of the vision. So next is, how do you actually set up to grow? So we've got the vision, and it's like, yeah, we want to grow to here, but how do you actually set yourself up with a foundation saying that you're going to be able to make this company become bigger than just you and maybe a couple of people that you're working with? A lot of small business owners, I would say most small business owners, run into basically doing everything in their businesses. And that's kind of a good thing. I mean, it means that you're learning all the processes of your business and you're learning everything that needs to be done. But it's a very detrimental thing when it comes to actually growing, because you can't grow. There's only so many hours in a day, and there's going to be a lot more that needs to be done in your business than you actually have time to do. The big inhibitor always is, if I let someone else do it, it won't be done as well as if I do it. And that's a quote I made up like a half an hour ago, but that remains true for most business owners that I've seen. They might be willing to delegate out a few things, but there's going to be things that they're really good at, which is why they got into business in the first place, that they're not willing to let anybody else do because they're scared they're going to screw it up. However, if you actually want to grow a company, you kind of have to let go of that mentality and say, you know what? I accept that someone's not going to do it as well as I do, but that's okay because that needs to happen. Like, I have to be able to delegate that task out in order to grow this company. So what we're looking at, or what I've heard before, and it's slightly different, kind of varies from 70 to 80%, but the concept remains true, is expect that anybody that you hire is going to do a task to 70 to 80% of the ability that you're going to be able to do it at. And there's sometimes people that will surprise you and they'll do it to like 110%. They'll do it better than you could ever do it, which is awesome if you get that. But don't expect that going in. Expect that your employees are going to be slightly under where you're at, and be okay with it. That's the biggest thing. Like an example, and then training to it. So if you know somebody's going to hit 70% of whatever you train them to, try and overtrain. So an example of that was back when I was running my painting company. You want to make sure that if you want somebody to paint a window in 10 minutes, when you're showing them how to do it, you're doing it well, but you're doing it in 7 minutes. Because if they expect then you have it done in 7 minutes and it takes them 10, they're going to work at it until they get to 7. But if you do it in 10 minutes, then they'll think that's the standard and they'll paint to that time and or slightly above it, 10, 12 minutes, whatever. So always try and either do it faster or better or over explain it so that when your employees are actually doing the task, it'll be closer to the quality that you're looking for. So obviously when you want to grow, you have to start hiring people. And when you start hiring, and I would say start hiring as soon as you can, as soon as is feasibly possible based on the revenue that you have coming in. And what you're essentially looking at is, what's my time worth? And if my time's worth this much, can I pay someone less to do the tasks that I'm doing so I can focus on other parts of the company? That's kind of your standard for when to start hiring other people. The big thing that we use, and that any business can use, whether a physical business or an online business, is what we call a wiki. And what a wiki is essentially an intranet, or what people would call an intranet now. The reason we call it a wiki is because it's where you keep all the knowledge on your company, whether that's forms or documents that you have, or procedures that you go through, or where you're currently at in terms of numbers. It all goes into a wiki. And if you haven't set that up, then that's something that I would highly recommend. The best place to set up a wiki is within Google Sites. So you just literally Google Sites, and you can set up an intranet there that's free, and it's super easy to use. And we can go into it in more detail if anyone of you want to hit me up after. Then I can help you out a bit there in terms of how to set it up and how to get going with that. It's best to get on it as soon as you can when you're starting a company, because what you want to do within the wiki is start documenting everything as you're doing it, and that way you don't have to explain to employees as you hire them what's going on, and or the big thing is actually not being consistent with what it is you're doing, because customers need consistency in order to find value in your company for most companies. When you're actually building out the wiki and building out your procedures and how you do things, don't get too hung up on how perfect it is. A lot of times it's just like, get it done and then we'll refine it later, or you'll hire employees to refine it later. And I'll get into that in a little bit. When you actually have completed your documentation and you're getting people to go through, like if you're hiring new employees and they're going through documentation that you've already put together, then have them email you, like put together essentially a course or a checklist of everything they need to know for the job that they're doing, and then make sure that they email you each step of the way to know that it's clear to them and they know what to do. And if they don't know what to do, then you can get back to it and put the training back into the wiki. And if you're creating videos, which you should be for any business, so rather than just putting checklists and writing it all out in written form, you should have videos for most of the things that you're doing, and or picture examples. And if you're online, you basically can record the screen as you're doing things and just say, do this, do what I'm doing. And if you're in a physical business, like I actually have started doing this with the resort, is you'll record tasks that people are doing like on site. So you can record anything from cleaning the cabin to building out irrigation systems. And then you'll put that on the wiki. And then when you have new employees come in, you don't have to retrain them. You can just say, go to this section of the wiki and do these tasks. So an example of a wiki, I'll show you. We've got actually a number of them for different companies, but this is one of the wikis for Sidekicks. And it's going to be set up slightly differently because this is more tailored to training even than a typical company, because we hire so many people. So for Sidekicks, which is the one of the companies that I'm working with, you can go to the side here, and like the first thing that I'll send the employee to is Sidekicks onboarding. So they'll click on that, and they'll go into the first section, and right away it'll have information on Sidekicks, welcome to Sidekicks, read our history, our core values, our business model, all that stuff. It's going to have information on the workplace and what we expect of them. And so this is all within the wiki. This is a Google site that you set up, and yeah, they'll go through and they'll go through the training one step at a time. And one thing that's really cool is that you can put YouTube videos right into the wiki, and it's really seamless to actually integrate that all. And then even videos that you record, you can put that into the wiki. We use a tool called Jing, and that's Jing, and that can record anything that you're doing on screen. So that if you want to record what you're doing on screen, you do that, and then you can upload that video later. Or there's another tool called Screencast, and I can give you that information if any of you guys have questions about that later. And then I upload my videos to a private YouTube account, so the videos are unlisted, and then we'll put the videos back into the wiki, and the employees can watch them, watch what we're doing, and then replicate those tasks to keep doing them. I've also got a document on how to set up your wiki, setting up for optimization of the company. I can get into that really quick here just to show you. and we can you can ask me for that later if you'd want. So how you actually set it up, you set it up within the wiki, about us, the team, hard data, communication, organization chart, all that stuff. And it kind of goes on. Your general operating procedures, all the stuff within there. Department docs, so all the documents you need for the various departments. And then really important is standard operating procedures, how you do things in the company, recording all that and putting that into the wiki so that there's no confusion about how you run your company. And the important part to all that is making sure that all the employees do know what's going on. And if you do it right, you don't actually have to even be involved. There's, like, within our business, we don't do any training for new employees unless it's new processes that we're putting out. We get an employee, they'll get a welcome video from us, and then they'll get right into the training with videos that we recorded. So it's like we're training them, it's like we're talking to them personally, but we're not actually taking our time to do it every time, and that's kind of important. Actually, it's hugely important because it saves us a ton of time. We wouldn't be able to scale to the point that we're scaling with Sidekicks if we had to train every employee. Like we've only been in operation for about 6 months, and we've got close. I think we have over 35 employees as long as I know. We are actually constantly hiring, so we might be anywhere between 35 and 40 employees now. Oops, sorry. Let me go all over the place with the slides here. Crushing the competition, step 4. So now you've got your company set up, and you have all your operating procedures and everything in place. You've got your systems built in that you've documented in your wiki. How do you ensure that everything actually happens? So the secret that every successful business has used is essentially accountability, but the real secret, which we'll get into just in a second here, is KPIs. One quote that I like, though, is your job is not to be a fire killer, your job is to prevent fires. So you don't want to be the guy that's going and just putting out fires all the time. You want to actually make sure that those fires don't happen in the first place. And one way to do that is to keep on top of your KPIs, which are key performance indicators. And the secret, I guess, to this whole step number 4, is make sure that every employee gets a number. So every employee has a number that they're accountable to. It's a little bit harder in physical businesses, but not always. So that you know if there's anything that is going wrong. So I'll go into a quick example. And this is for Sidekicks. It's not even the best example that there is out there. Because I'd like to get more specific than this usually. With our company, though, it's a little bit hard to get into specifics because a lot of our employees are actually working with external clients, and it's hard to measure the specifics within that. But so for each employee we have a measurable. So here we've got the sign-in time, the goal. So the employee actually sets the time. We work flexi time with our employees. They'll set the goal as to when they actually want to sign in. Then they need to make sure that they're actually signing in before that time. And if they're not, then we mark it in red, or the system does now anyway. This is actually an old sheet. The system that we have now will mark it in red if they're not coming in on time. Hours worked, they have a goal of how many hours they want to work, and then they either hit that goal or they don't hit that goal. And then here they have their daily reports, which in this case is kind of a number. They have a number of clients they've got. Let's say this employee has 3 clients, then we're actually going to be looking for 3 screencasts from them in terms of what they've actually done with their daily report. Better ways to do this, though, like especially if you have a company that uses social media, is say you have whoever the person is in your company. The measurable will often be number of users or number of likes or conversions. And then the goal, you'll set whatever goal it is. So we're looking for 10 new likes a day on Facebook, or we're looking for, it depends on how big your company is, 100 new likes a day on Instagram, or 100 followers on Instagram, or whatever it is, if you're doing something that's social media related. For bigger companies, so every company still would use KPIs. Um, for bigger companies, what we like to do is the weekly pulse. So we actually do this with Sidekicks, and what we do is we every week we get each of our employees to fill this in so that we actually have an idea of what's going on with the team and we're staying on top of it rather than coming to an employee 6 months after they're employed and find out that they have some kind of issue with what's going on or a problem in the company or whatever. We'll find out within the week if there's anything going on. We like to give weekly recognition to an employee for somebody that's actually exhibiting our core values. And then we get into good news. People will share like what worked well for them that week. We'll get into, this is a big one that we like to look at, roadblocks. So areas that they're having problems with within the company so that we can address those right away rather than let that wait. This is really important, make it better. So every week, everyone's required, they have to actually write something down, giving a suggestion for how they could make the company better, how they can make their community better, how they can make something better in their lives. So like here you can see somebody actually give a screenshot for what's going on and what they think could be better about the company. And something like here we're talking about pods is something that we were discussing there. You see like some people, they might not have an idea how to make something better, but they know they have to write something in there. So they're writing. And then lastly, how are you feeling? So just jumping on top of if anybody's feeling frustrated or down or whatever it is, then just finding out what that reason is, or maybe it's just a matter of just leaving them alone for the week because they're wanting to be left alone, and that's fine as well. So jumping back to this, for smaller companies, what we do is we get every employee to write a short daily email, and a lot of our employees do this with their clients, not necessarily always with us. But if you have a smaller company, what your employees are doing that day, what they're doing tomorrow, and what roadblocks they have, it's similar to the pulse. The reasons why that works, or the key points to make sure it works, is make sure people actually do it. So kind of enforce it if it's not getting done. Because the big thing is it actually keeps your employees more organized. They're actually going to be doing, or they're going to be thinking about the day before what they have to do the next day, which means they don't spend the next morning just screwing around basically because they don't have a clear indication of what they're actually going to do in the next day. Also, if you have a common box that everybody can look at, if you have a small team, it'll keep everybody in the team aware of what's going on, and that's kind of important as well. So this gets back to the weekly sprints or 2-week sprints, I guess, which I discussed earlier. The 2-week sprints are pretty important, and they should happen even if you're gone. Like as the owner of a company, they should still continue on. Using a task management software, which we kind of went over. Making sure you're sharing numbers, which is your KPIs. When you're doing your sprints and you're doing your sprint meetings, it's good to start at an odd time, like 3:57, because if you say we're starting at 4, a lot of times people will show up at 4:05 or 4:10 or 4:03 or whatever. If you have an exact time, like 3:57, it keeps people a little bit more accountable to actually showing up on time. And make sure that people actually come prepared. It's not like you come to those meetings and you allow people to actually think out in the meeting what's going to be going on, what they're planning for the next couple of weeks. You actually want them to think about it beforehand. So in the monthly meetings, you're going to set clear priorities. So you're basically setting 3 to 5 goals per person of what they're actually going to accomplish for the next month. And this is all part of accountability. Then every day they're actually looking at what those 3 to 5 things are that they're looking at accomplishing that month. And they're seeing if the things that they're working on that day actually contribute to whatever it is that their goals are. And then lastly, stop, start, continue is just looking at tasks, starting any tasks that need to be started. So that might be 3 to 5. Stop any tasks that are not working and is not worth pursuing, and continue any tasks that are working well. So the last step, I guess, to bringing this all together is, and making it happen within a 10-hour work week is what I put here. So how do you work less hours and make more money, which is kind of the thought behind anybody that's started a company. Um, Sorry guys, it is 6 o'clock, so if you have to go, you can go. But if you just give me just a couple more minutes, then you can finish up here. And if you want to stick around for questions, I'll be happy to stick around for questions after. Um, so the way that you want to avoid being stressed out is to find rock stars that can actually work for you. However, when you're a smaller company or a startup, where do you actually find rock stars? If you're on a limited budget, you're not making much money, you've found a business that you're making money, but you're not making tons. Where do you actually find people that are willing to work for you and or with you? So one is partners. Partners can work well, but it's also super risky. Most partnerships actually fail, which is a scary prospect. But they can work well if you're actually working with partners that have completely different skill sets and you're all contributing to the team. The problem there is actually finding those partners and finding someone that wants to work with you on whatever project that you are working on, and somebody that maybe is willing to not get paid for the first 6 months to the year of whatever company you're starting, because that's a reality of starting many companies. Another great option is interns, and I can get into that with anybody that might be interested after. But interns can do some of the groundwork for you. I mean, not groundwork, but tasks that are simpler tasks that need to get done, but you don't have time to do. However, you're only going to get interns to work for you if you've actually shown success in other companies, because nobody's going to come work for you for free unless they think they're going to get something out of it, which in this case is knowledge. Um, Another option for small companies is VAs, which is virtual assistants. And virtual assistants can be a great option because they're fairly low cost. However, the hard thing with VAs is it's hard to find a VA that's actually a rock star VA, that are actually going to do great work for you and be dependable and actually stick with it and not go and jump off the bandwagon. Um, and so that kind of gets into the next bit here. If the interns are out and if partners are risky, and even if you do have partners that are great, there's only so much that partners can do. There's going to come a time when you've got more tasks to do than both of you can do put together, in which case you're going to have to bring someone else on. And sometimes it's not always feasible to pay someone a North American wage to get that done, because you just don't have the money in the company yet. So the only option really left there is VAs if you're still a small company and you're wanting to scale up. VAs, I've personally witnessed them scale hundreds of companies, but they've helped scale thousands and thousands of online companies. And it's kind of the new wave of business that's feasible for first world countries anyway, is bringing on virtual assistants to help them with tasks that they might need doing. Often this isn't an online company. However, there's VAs that can help with. There's VAs that help with physical companies as well, like for tasks such as bookkeeping and or taking care of website related issues and or social media or email organization or scheduling or whatever it might be. So let's say that you think that's an option that works for you. What are your actual options for where do you actually hire these people? Um, so Odesk is one of the first platforms where people started hiring VAs, and Odesk is a place that you go there. It's a platform, same as like kind of any other hiring platform. You go, you post a job, and then you have applicants that apply to work for you, which is good if you have time to do all the filtering. So that's essentially means screening the candidates and then testing the candidates with tasks to find out if they're actually going to work well for you, and then hoping those candidates stick around long enough to continue working with you. Then there's Fancy Hands. There's quite a few agencies. These are just kind of some of the top ones that most people use. Fancy Hands is based out of the States. They use US-based virtual assistants, and they're good for really simple one-off tasks. So you basically just give them a task and they do it for you. And they usually just do it. It's like one at a time tasks. Fiverr is similar to Easy Hands. You'll go to a specialist in a certain area, which is slightly different, and you'll ask them to do something for you. So you might have someone that's Excel or marketing or whatever it is, and you'll get them to do, again, a one-off task, but it's more specialized. OnlineJobs.ph is very similar to Odesk. You go onto OnlineJobs.ph. It's a hiring platform. The difference is Odesk is international. OnlineJobs.ph is based out of just the Philippines, and it's the same deal as Odesk. You go on there, you post a job, and then you have a virtual assistant from the Philippines apply to work for you. The reason that it's attractive is because the Philippines has been found culturally to be a very stable country for using virtual assistants, whereas a lot of assistants from other countries, and I hate to point out specific countries, but countries such as like India or China, you'll get VAs, and they have the best intentions, but they don't always understand what the tasks are that need doing, and or they won't let you know that they don't understand. So they'll say they know how to do a task, and then you'll get it back, and it'll be completely butchered. And that has a little bit more to do with part of it. It's cultural because they want to be able to please you, and then part of it also, as well as often the English is not as good, whereas the Philippines, you can find people that speak excellent English there, and so the communication's a lot easier. And then there's just a different cultural standard there as well. They're they're a lot more loyal, and they are more open to creative solutions when it comes to tasks that you're giving them. And then there's Sidekicks.co, which, as you already know by now, is a company that we started. And we started Sidekicks.co. Like I'll get into this, I guess, in a second here, because we found that there was nobody that was really intent on actually helping companies scale. They were more just looking to match people up with VAs. So Sidekicks.co, they'll actually do the filtering for you, which means that we have about 1,000 applicants a week that come to us that want to work for our company as a virtual assistant. And on average, we hire about 2 of those. So we actually screen down from 1,000 to 2 through a number of tests, and then sample tasks that we have them do and evaluate before they are actually allowed to work for us. The other thing that you can do with us is you can apply to work or have a VA work for you for less than full time or less than part time. Like, so rather than working for 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week, they can work for 10 hours a week if that's all the time that you need them to work for you. And then we actually train them as well in a lot of the business softwares that are outdoor. And basically everything that I went through in this whole webinar is stuff that they come pre-trained in, as well as other things such as like, let's say, website builders, and or they do some minor accounting stuff, and social media and marketing as well. So they come trained with how to actually help you scale your company, which we think is the ultimate goal when you're actually hiring your VAs. So kind of went over this already, but basically we discovered that there was a lot of companies that were looking to scale, but they didn't know how, or if they'd heard how, they were putting various parts of the process together, but they weren't getting it quite right, and they were getting pretty frustrated along the way. When I say we'd hired VAs with major success, that's more like Jeremy had, and he was one of the guys that came to me, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar here, and he'd basically come up with the whole hiring process that worked pretty well for him. And he got a number of rockstar VAs to work on his companies and build them up to $1 million plus companies. And he had a system that worked essentially, and he was having people come to him saying, how do we get the VAs that you're getting? So he started helping people source those VAs, but then pretty soon he found out that once they had the VAs, they didn't know what to do with them, and he started helping with that. And then that's also where I came in, was helping put together the management tasks. How do you actually manage your VAs, and how do you put together a company to make everybody work together and help it grow? And that's essentially what we're helping people do. So we've put together within Sidekicks. If you subscribe, you basically get the CEO course, which will go through kind of everything I did here. Was the whirlwind tour, but it goes into everything in a lot more detail, into how to actually build everything out and scale your company. So yeah, that's essentially this. I just kind of went over these points. We built courses for the entrepreneurs that were coming to us, as well as building courses out for the VAs, showing them how to use a lot of the business software and how to help owners scale their companies. And as I mentioned before, we're kind of the only service that I've seen that's actually committed to helping people grow their companies, and not just a simple matching company. So if you guys had any um, interest in what it is that we do in more detail, you can always check out this webpage. It's just http / sidekicks.co. So you can check that out. I, that basically concludes the talk. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into the question bar there, and I'd be more than happy to answer them.